Ms. Cullen.
There are certain institutions and companies that have been dubbed too big to fail. Specifically, financial institutions and automobile companies. What is your opinion on government bailouts of financial institutions and automobile companies?
I think it's sad when the government can decide what companies can continue and what companies can fail. There are a lot of small businesses that need help, that they don't get the help. And there are a lot of big businesses that get the help and they don't need the help because they don't follow the guidelines that need to be followed. And it depends on who it is and what hand they have, I think, in the government. And I think it's bad whenever the government is offering bailouts with our money, with our taxpayers' money, and we don't get a say in it. And it depends on who's in, for lack of a better word, their back pocket, for who gets to survive and who does not get to survive. So I disagree with bailouts, and I think they're wrong.
Mr. Mayor.
Let's get this straight. We're at war. This country's thrown apart. We need to find out who's controlling things, who's doing things wrong. If it's too big to fail, it's too big to keep. We need to restructure our government so that those who can will do what we need them to do, that will follow the Constitution and will follow the laws of this country. Having someone to be able to have friends in D.C. and change the rules of the game just for them, while other companies struggle and fail because they don't have the same help or the same friends, is wrong. This country is built on competition, on freedom. We need to bring that back to our marketplace. We need to unleash the American worker, not restrain them again. We need to have free markets in our own country so that all can compete and all can win.
I totally disagree. As somebody that studied economics, studied business cycle theory, has got a master's degree in finance, we absolutely must bail out the largest corporations when they get in trouble. Otherwise, it just becomes too disruptive. Not only do we lose all the employees in that entire industry, we lose all the suppliers, we lose all the vendors. Just imagine if General Motors and Chrysler had actually failed. We've gone 2 years without all the things that those companies are doing. What the problem was with the government, although they did it pretty good with automobile companies, because we're making money on that deal right now, is when you've got them over a barrel, you just make sure you've got to get a good deal. We did a pretty good deal. We had to bail out the banks, so this whole financial system would have fallen apart. And when you have somebody over the barrel, you just need to make sure you get a strong deal and put sanctions and conditions in effect so that the employees and the businesses are saved, but the stockholders lose out. It's real easy to do.
Ms. Jenrette.
Wow. That's an interesting slant because, according to my Constitution, the government shouldn't be bailing any private business out. Yeah! One company's failure is someone else's opportunity in the United States of America. When someone fails, that's on them. We don't sit there and run a foot race. My daughter can tell you all about foot races. We don't say, well, she came in last, but give her the first place medal. Chrysler is a good example of failure. Chrysler was failing before Lee Iacocca took it over and brought it from out of the ashes and made it the phoenix that it became. Failure is part of our fabric of our country. No, I'm sorry. That's very unconstitutional. I can't stand for that.
It was a very sad day when our government decided it was appropriate to bail out any corporation. America acted in a very un-American way. It is not the government's job to pick winners and losers, and that's the bottom line. It's the government's job to make sure that everyone has an equal playing field when it comes to how you approach business. It's not the government's job to step in and rescue folks who make selfish and poor judgment decisions when it comes to operating a business or a corporation. I'm convinced that day When that day happened, I was hoping it would be a day, because it was a day for me, then it was a transition time, where it was an opportunity, I thought, for our country to wake up. And many of us did, and I think that's why you saw different types of folks getting elected to Congress, folks that believed it was more about service and sacrifice than what it has been in the past. But absolutely, we made a poor decision, and we're going to continue to pay the consequences of it, but no bailout is a good bailout.
Mr. Jones, can you pass the microphone back to Mr. Whittington? He gets 30 seconds to rebut because he was basically singled out because they say your stance is unconstitutional.
I don't think these, the last two speakers understood what I said. When the owners of the corporation and the stockholders of the corporation lose everything, that's a pretty, and the employees continue to keep their jobs, I think that's a pretty good thing. And we do need to be aware of that. We've done it a lot in our history.
Mr. Prosser, you get 1 minute.
Thank you. Washington bureaucrats make very poor venture capitalists, and we saw that as a great example with Solyndra, where the government invested and lost $500 billion of our tax dollars trying to create a green energy project. The government should not be in the business of picking winners and losers. It's simply not the fundamental function of government. We have bankruptcy laws for that purpose. I'm not in favor of bailing out the automobile companies or any other manufacturer in this country, but let's look at the root cause of the problem. General Motors is not a car company. General Motors is a health care provider that sells cars in order to fund a health care program. That's why we need to repeal Obamacare to say it costs twice as much as was originally projected by the president. That's why we have to address health care and health care costs, because the trend line at its current rate is going to ensure that health care takes up 100% of our GDP. That's what we have to turn around.
Mr. Wallace, same question.
Well, you know, the United States government is not the Bank of America, and it shouldn't be out bailing out corporations. You know, I'm in the real estate business, and I watched it, you know, after the federal government went in there and bailed out all the banks. It didn't really accomplish anything because those banks didn't loan any money. And for the longest time, for the last few years, you've had basically a yard sale going on, but you couldn't borrow enough money to buy anything. So, you know, you didn't really accomplish anything except get some bad debt off the books and let them sit there and hold their money. And that's a shame. And this thing called, this bill that was named after Chris Dodd and Barney Frank, that right there ought to tell you that it ought to be repealed. The government should never have gotten into that, and that's the bill that has given them the power to do this, and it needs to be repealed.
Mr. Bauer.
I wouldn't have voted for the bailout. I would have called out my leadership when they tried to push for the bailout. Look, if we'd been doing bailouts, Studebaker, Packard, DeSoto, they'd still be in business. This clearly is where our government has gone awry. If you look at the fact that the President of the United States somehow, as a community organizer, made over $750,000 last year, we need to be asking more questions. I don't know how he managed to do it, but we've got a serious problem here. I'm in the real estate business. I had friends that were current on their payments and the bank took their property after a bailout that was supposed to help people. The bank came to them and said, you got to have more money because your property's not what it used to be worth. There is something catastrophically wrong with that system. The government shouldn't be in the banking business. The government should, quite frankly, we need to go back and look at the whole Federal Reserve. We've got a broken problem in this country. We've got dollars that are being printed with nothing to back it up, and we have a debt that is continually growing at an enormous rate, and I can't believe people aren't rioting in the streets.
Mr. Weiss.
The government should not pick winners and losers. We have systems in place that will allow for transitions such as the bankruptcy court. And you know, this has happened before, and not quite as severe. In my career, this has happened before. In 86, 87, a lot of y'all will remember that. A lot of the banks around here failed. And the government set up an entity called the Resolution Trust Corporation. And they came in, they gathered up the assets, and they disposed of them, and they did it quickly, and they did it efficiently. It was over in 2 years. The banks were healthy again. And here we sit, 4 years after this crisis, and the banks are still hopping. And they're still